I think from a training perspective, we're not doing a good enough job as an industry. My perspective is in creating careers. And I see so many qualified people who want to be trainers who end up not being able to build a career because they're not naturally entrepreneurial. And then they go and do something tangentially related like physical therapy or chiropractic or whatever. Leaving Wall Street and opening this crazy online bookstore back in the late 90s. And everybody thought he was absolutely bananas, but he believed in it. And for me, I always knew like, hey, if I left, tried this out, and it failed after a couple of years, I could always go back. I have the skill set to do that, to go back to Amazon or any other tech company. But if I don't do this and I sit there and I'm 80 years old and I'm like, shit, I wish I would have done that. The big thing when you're firing someone is always to have, you don't want it to be a surprise for them. You want to have had to have a lot of conversations before that and to have all of those conversations documented about where they're underperforming and where they need to be developed.
Hello, and welcome to Gym World Worldwide. I am your co-host, John Franklin, joined with me, as always, my friend, my neighbor, my business partner, Mateo Lopez. And with us this week, we have a very special guest, the owner and CEO of Seattle Strength and Performance, none other than Chris Travis. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
You were just putting some content out on social media that you were tired. So, I don't want that energy in this Zoom room. I want you to bring the heat.
Yeah, man. I'm an introvert. So, Austin was a lot for me, the Business for Unicorns retreat, but it was a great time, but I'm recovered now. I'm ready to go.
Okay, perfect. So, what is Seattle Strength and Performance? You normally see Seattle Strength or like Seattle Performance. You have the Strength and Performance. You need both.
It's a double whammy.
Those.
Yeah.
You should have added fitness, strength, performance, and fitness to hit every one of the.
It's power too. I think power is not a good word. Yeah. It's the gym that I own in Seattle. We have a couple locations in a couple neighborhoods in Seattle, and we're opening a third one this year. I opened my first gym in pandemic era. So August, 2020, opened my second one about 18 months later. And my third one coming up this year in a couple months. So we got about,
I feel like August, 2020, you could have been like, you had enough time to realize, no,
I know I did,
but I didn't do it right now.
That's cool. This is not a good idea. Well, it says on your LinkedIn here, it says you started in June 2019. So were you in the lease already?
Yeah. So I actually, I left. This is mainly just to make sure I don't have an employment gap on my LinkedIn, to be honest with you. I left Amazon in mid 2019. I think May exactly. So I was at Amazon for 10 years before that, doing a bunch of different roles.
One of those.
And then I know, right? You guys are a tech company now, so you
gave up a good thing going to open up a gym.
And then I basically just started training people and kind of learning from the ground up. And then I opened the gym in August 2020.
Yeah, Kilo is top of mind shortly behind Amazon when people think of great tech companies where people have a decade of experience. So
you guys will be Fortune 5, no time.
Shortly, just after a few more feature releases.
Yeah, right.
All right, so you got rid of Amazon. You left Amazon June 2019. There was a gap, but you ended up opening these places. What gave you the idea to open a gym? Like what were you thinking, man?
Yeah, crazy, right? So it wasn't anything to do with Amazon. I mean, Amazon's a pretty intense place, but I was being promoted and leading pretty cool initiatives there and having a good time. And it was one of those things where going back to 2010 when I started, when I first started Amazon, I worked on the early days of Kindle. And I was working 80, 90-hour weeks. I mean, it was a pretty intense place. And I kind of just lost my health completely, to be honest with you. So about 4 or 5 years in, started strength training and joining a gym again and seeing the health benefits of that. And then kind of long story short, kind of got a bug in my ear, kind of got geeky about it and was like, how does this stuff work? How do I potentially help other people? And then there was about a year span where I couldn't get that out of my head. It was just sitting there. And if you ever worked at Amazon, kind of like Bezos' story and his framework for thinking. And he has a great quote about being 80 years old and not wanting to think about the things that he had regrets on. And if you look at his story, kind of like leaving Wall Street and opening this crazy online bookstore back in the late 90s, and everybody thought he was absolutely bananas. But he believed in it. And for me, I always knew like, hey, if I left, tried this out and it failed after a couple years, I could always go back. I have the skill set to do that, to go back to Amazon or any other tech company. But if I don't do this and I sit there and I'm 80 years old and I'm like, shit, I wish I would have done that, then I don't want to be in that place. So that was really the impetus for it.
What was you said like you were getting dragged in, like what was the defining factor? Like I know for Teo, for you, it was Dan John's books, right? The scripture of Dan John and the single arm overhead press was like the thing that drew you in.
John is being facetious right now, dear viewers and listeners. No, it was literally CrossFit. Like it was literally just like hanging out at a box after my freshman year and just seeing the gym owner, Bryce, and being like, dude, your life seems sick. You get to work out all day. You get to preach the gospel of this amazing methodology that changed my life. I want to change other people's lives. Let's do that. And then, yeah, I read the Dan John stuff. Single arm press, the only movement you ever have to do in your entire life. That was cool too. I wanted to spread that gospel as well. Quick aside here. We had a marketing presentation from a few years back now, and we were trying to explain how to calculate your available acquisition costs for a new client, and basically telling people, hey, you can spend some money to acquire a client because there's going to be back-end revenue. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Many companies don't even make money on the front end. One of the examples was Kindle. Literally, I think I don't remember the exact number, so I wanted to confirm with you. Is it true that you guys just spent like $500 million and just use that as a loss leader because you're not going to get books in the back end?
I would say most Amazon businesses, when they launch or new initiatives, don't make any money for a long time.
Yeah.
Kindle being one of them. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Love it. So you can be just like them, Jim. If you want to be like Bezos, gym owners.
But be like the Kindle, not like the Fire Phone.
Yeah, don't be like the Fire Phone. Some bets don't work out. Some bets do. Yeah.
So yeah, what got you into the gym space?
I mean, it's pretty much it. I mean, I just wanted to help people, to be honest with you. That was it.
But like, what was it? Were you going to a gym? Did you read something? What was it? Was there a person? Was there?
I love the community. And when I got geeky about it, I had a great mentor. This guy's name was Jay. Kind of took me under his wing, showed me the style of training that we do, which is really kind of sports performance influenced by the Mike Boyles, Eric Crises of the world. And I just realized that I could have a real impact on people. And that was really the driving force behind it, to be honest with you.
Okay. So we know you do performance and strength. So what do I buy when I go to your gym? Like, what are you selling me?
Yeah. I mean, we're selling, the type of training that we do is influenced by the Mike Boyles and the Eric Crises of the world. So it's pretty similar. Most of what we do is Gen Pop though, right? So
a lot of people won't understand what that is or who that is.
General population training.
No, I'm talking. No. The Mike Boyle and Eric Cressy part.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're only known in like your corner of the world. There are entire corners of fitness who won't know who they are. As crazy as that might sound.
That does seem crazy to me. Yeah, because they're super big in my world. But I think so. Typically, what we'd tell people is like, hey, we do kind of athletic performance style training. So it's based on the principles of that. However, we take those same principles and we apply them to anybody from 20 something up to 80 plus, right? So every workout you're doing some kind of mobility and activation, dynamic warm up. We train power because power is something that you lose quicker than you do muscle mass as you age. That could look anything from like a medicine ball slam to a wall throw to a kettlebell swing, or so some of our youth athletes, we do barbell hang cleans, right? Stuff like that. So that will always start off with that. We train core at the beginning too, just because we want to make sure we kind of connect the top and the bottom half and get you ready and primed for your resistance training section. We then train every movement pattern. So you get some kind of push, some kind of pull, some kind of squat, some kind of hinge. We'll move through different planes. We're going side to side. We're rotating. And anything that kind of helps you live and do things that you would normally do in your normal life a little bit better, right? Very rarely are we kind of like 2 feet together, squatting something down. We're moving and we're reaching over, and we want to make you stronger in those planes of life. And then we do some kind of finisher. We leave people on a high. A lot of times it has to do with conditioning, put them on the assault bike, push the sled around, do the Versa climber. Sometimes it's like, hey, if somebody has a little more like maybe aesthetic goals, we do some more isolation exercises, but it's really kind of customized to the person.
Okay.
Is that better?
So
yeah.
Yeah, no, that helps.
Yeah.
Athletic, functional fitness, perhaps. And so what's the model? Is it you have large group classes, small group classes, one-on-ones, all of the above?
Yeah, we do small group personal training. And then I would say we do large group classes. Large group, we only have maybe 3 to 4 classes a day. So we'll have one in the early morning, midday, evening. And then we do mainly small group personal training through the rest of the day. And I would say the style that we do as small group is probably more akin to something called semi-private, even though we don't really use that word. Small group tends to be everyone is doing the same program in a kind of 6-to-1 coach ratio, right? But there's slight progressions or regressions or changes depending on the individual. We'll actually take an individual and give them a program, but we'll still put 6 people in the session. The coach is responsible for coaching each individual person in that session based upon their own programming.
Yeah, we just had a podcast trying to work out this terminology, the difference between small group personal training and semi-private personal training.
He gave the same answer, so it looks like that is universally accepted. So we'll run with that. And what does it cost to work out at your gym? Like, what's the average member paying?
Yeah, I mean, so we have memberships that range from $199, and we bill every 4 weeks, up to $669. The average member is paying just under $300.
And I was looking at some of your stuff. These gyms don't look very big. How much square footage you got rocking?
Well, real estate's expensive in Seattle. It's all
Yeah.
Amazon. It's all those Kindles you've been selling.
One location is 1,800 square feet in our Queen Anne location, and the other one is 1,300 square feet.
Is this the other one here?
This is Queen Anne right here. Yeah.
Okay, so this one's 1,300.
No, this one's 1,800. The one you were just on is 1,300.
Okay.
The new one that I'm opening in a couple months, that one is going to be 2,800. So it's quite a bit larger than the other two.
Oh,
and why
bigger.
are you going bigger?
Honestly, it wasn't a day to go bigger. It was just more that I found the right space at the right price, and I decided to go for it.
And what kind of revenue can you do out of these little spaces?
Yeah, each one. So the one that I've had for about 4 years now is on track to do about $880 this year in revenue. The smaller one, 1,300 square feet, is about $650. I think is kind of the number that we're going to end on. And the 2,800 one, I don't know. We're just kind of going to let it go.
Are you are you pretty maxed out at both of those? Is that towards the top end? Because that sounds on the higher end of revenue per square foot for sure.
It is, yeah. So the smaller one, 1,300 square feet, space is a real issue for sure. But we have over 200 members that we work out of that location. So it's a lot to manage. Yeah.
Yeah. The only other guy I know who's doing those numbers in a space that's that size that's not in New York would be Greg over at the Fit Lab, who's also, I think he's doing similar numbers out of 1,400 square feet, which is crazy.
How does that work? Because we had at some points 220 to 250 at the New York location, and we thought we were out of space, and we had more space in that 1,300 spot. How are you fulfilling all those people in that space? Are most people only working out 2-3 times a week? Is that how you?
Yeah, I would say the average person comes in 3 to 4 is kind of what it looks like.
And on top of that, it's small group. How is that even physically possible?
We actually do something that we call is a stagger to try and maximize the space. So for instance, we'll have 4 people roll in at 7 a.m., 4 people roll in at 7:30, 4 people roll in at 8. And so we kind of roll the sessions that way. And then we, do we kind of what I call systemize the warm up. So we kind of change the warm up and people kind of warm up on their own. So everybody has their own warm up. They do that on their own for the first 10 minutes or so. And so by the time they're ready to go on their session, the other group is starting to exit on their way out.
That's the Dan Trank over at the Fort. Dan and Kyle, they do a similar kind of circle and on the 30-minute as well.
It's called turning tricks. Turning tricks is what they say in the biz.
That's what they call it?
Is that true?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even remotely true. I don't think anybody calls it
just
that.
Just a little pushback in you. Okay,
I don't think anybody calls it except for me. All right. So you got the gyms. They're open 4 years. They're doing well with, a non-traditional fitness background, which is cool. Love to see it. Love to see it for the fans. And what's the goal? You going to open 100 of these things? You take over Seattle? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, definitely taking over Seattle right now. That's the goal. So have a plan to go at least up to 5 in the next 3 years. And then from there, kind of see what the plan is. I haven't really thought beyond that.
You were recommended to us by our dear friend, Michael Keeler. You are now a coach in his group, but you weren't at the time. And he, the reason you were interesting, or he said you'd be interesting to us, is that you do better than most at hiring and retaining people. And that is one of the most common things we hear from gym owners. That it's very hard to find talent. It's very hard to retain talent. It's very hard to figure out how to pay talent. And certainly something that I struggled with as a gym owner all the time. So maybe walk us through what you got going on and how you think about that.
And one more while you're at it too, just to reemphasize that, we'd love to hear your perspective on it in living and operating in a high cost of living city.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think, so obviously I have a non-traditional, non-fitness background, right? So when I came into fitness, I started like every other trainer, just from the bottom, learning the business, and ended up contracting in a gym for a little time, finding my own clients, and worked into working at a gym and getting paid per hour per client, so I worked in all those different models. And for me, I just realized like all of that sucks, man. Like I think from a training perspective, we're not doing a good enough job as an industry. My perspective is in creating careers. And I see so many qualified people who want to be trainers who end up not being able to build a career because they're not naturally entrepreneurial. And then they go and do something tangentially related like physical therapy or chiropractic or whatever, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of physical therapists that I meet with end up wanting to be trainers. They just end up being physical therapists because they didn't feel like there was a career path to be a trainer.
I think the same can be said about gym owners. The only way to make more money, they think, is to open their own spot, when really that maybe was not the best use of their talents.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Or they weren't ready.
So I came in with a different philosophy where I said, okay, the hires that I make, I'm going to try and build careers. And by that, I mean, I'm going to try and salary them, which I know is kind of like a crazy word in the fitness industry. But I said, I'm going to give them a full-time 40-hour-a-week job, and I'm going to salary them. And what that looks like is I'm going to give them about 25 hours a week on the floor, and I'm going to give them about 15 hours a week of doing other stuff in the business, whatever that may be. Sometimes program design, sometimes following our prospects SOP and following up with people, sometimes following up with members, all that kind of stuff. And then I just kind of slowly built on that model as I've expanded, and started to think about how do I build a career path and development path of people within the organization. And so at this point, I've kind of created a whole leveling structure with an SSP that says, hey, here's where you start at SSP, and here's how you grow at SSP, and here's the expectations for how you do that. And so basically I have 2 paths. One is everybody starts at what I call as an assistant level at SSP, which is kind of entry level position. The base salary for that is about $50,000 a year. But I give full medical, dental, vision benefits. The SSP pays up to 75% of that. I give them a 401k with match. I match at 4%. I give them 3 weeks of paid time off. So I'm giving them like a full benefits package per employee. It ends up being about 10K additional per employee. And then what I do from there is you can go up to a specialist level, a manager level, or from there it kind of dovetails into two different paths. And so I realize that some coaches just want to coach, and they're good at that, and they want to stay on the floor for their career. They don't want to go into management level. They don't want to manage anybody, right? But they want to create more impact. And so I kind of have a path that way for them in that respect. And then if they do want to be a manager, basically I put them on a different path where eventually they come off the floor entirely. They end up managing most of the staff and most of the people from that perspective. So there's kind of 2 distinct paths on that in that way. And there's a leveling guideline that kind of talks about the roles, responsibilities, and the expectations at each level. And then there's compensation assigned to each level as well. And then we have a pretty rigorous performance review process where every 6 months we're meeting. At the 6-month mark, it's really a check-in trend, like how are things going? Where are you developing? Where do you need help? How do you feel about the organization? What are your superpowers? Where do you want to best contribute? So we have that whole conversation. And then at the year mark is where we do the official performance review. We have them fill out a full document where they give us feedback. We do 360 review feedback from the rest of the team. And at that point is when we talk about potential pay raises, potential promotions, what their path is. If they're not quite ready for promotion, what do they need to do in order to get that over the next 6 to 12 months? And so we're always pretty clued in with all of our employees about what their path is, what their development path is. And so people, I think, feel taken care of. They feel like they're developing. They feel like they're moving forward. And I think that leads to better retention and kind of like better culture in the gym.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, shoot.
My first question is, how many roles to operate a facility? How many assistants do you need? How many of the managerial? How many people? How many bodies?
Yeah, at base level, I just need 2. So I need a specialist level role who kind of acts as like a facility lead. And then I need somebody who's kind of like a program design assistant.
That's it for 200 people?
For 200 people, you just need 2 people.
Wow. Okay. How did we do this wrong, John?
Well, it sounds like too many coaches, because I think we were operating similar at a similar scale, and we had 4.
Were they all full-time?
All full-time.
Well, part of the way.
What does full-time mean, though?
It was at one point, at the most dialed in, it was very similar to yours, but it was 20 hours of coaching instead of 25, and the expectation was 15 of other work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but one of the problems we ran into, and Teo can probably speak to it, it was like the value of the other work varied dramatically, right? So you had a guy like Mateo who would take on, he was just for the team. He was smart. He could write emails. He'd get back in Zen Planner, figure out what was wrong, and just get shit done. So very high value 15-hour block, where he was making the same amount of money as somebody else who maybe was doing something that was like catered towards their skill set, but maybe wasn't as value generative to the business, which led to friction. Is that a proper assessment?
That is a great assessment and succinct assessment of one of the issues we had, for sure. What's the 15 hours that you're able to make sure it's all value generative, as John would put it?
Yeah, I think if you think about it in terms of, I think about it in terms of like functional areas, right? So for me, it's like there's an assistant whose responsibility it is to do all of the program design for that location, right? So they're responsible for updating every single program for every single client that comes through that location. And then they're paired with somebody who's more on the operations, sales, and marketing side, right? So like a facility lead who has other responsibilities beyond that, but they're not really crossing over, right? And they both add value to the business. And one position is intentionally elevated because they do have a little bit more responsibility, so they do make a little bit more than the other person. And so I think just try to be transparent and clear about those roles and responsibilities.
I do think that was another thing that I've noticed. I don't know how you feel about it, John, but interacting more with the people in the Biz for Unicorns group, those gym owners, there is a lot more emphasis on training and program design and coaching. I know for us, it was like, we've got CrossFit, so it's just some version of CrossFit. And, we never had like someone's full job just thinking about this, at least at the New York one.
Be a few people come from the Eric Cressy, Mike Boyle, like that whole corner of the world. That's all they think about. They spend hours just agonizing over, whether they're holding a kettlebell or a dumbbell for the squat. And that is a life or death decision. Then they'll go on the internet and argue with other people about the decision that they made. And like, that's that crew. And then you got to remember, like, you said you do individualized program. A guy like James Pratt does individualized program. So you got 200, 250 members, you got 200, 250 programs. We had class. And it was one thing, and it was scaled, and we hired somebody else to do it for us most of the time. So we hired a service that was like, this is the class plan. And we would just like, here's how we can set it up in our tiny little space.
But I bring it up only because, do you think that's a big reason why you're able to charge more? Like for these gyms, money is not never the issue, but it seems like these gyms are making more than the gyms that we kind of grew up around, cut our teeth around. So I just wonder if a lot of the value is you're getting your own custom thing. We spend a lot of time with this. Our trainers are super knowledgeable, specialized performance people.
I think that's 100% part of the value for sure that people see. And I also think it helps when they're in the gym that they're not doing the same stuff that somebody else is doing in the gym, right? It feels personal to them, and it feels like the coach is actually coaching them based upon their assessment and their needs. And then, I think honestly, similar to CrossFit, we do a pretty good job once they're in the gym of cultivating community. And so that becomes kind of the stickiness, right? For them to stick around for a long time.
I don't think it is 100% of the reason why. I take the other side of this. I think
I'm not saying it's 100%. I'm wondering if, because that is a different variable, but go 100%. For it, John. What's your take?
And I do think I don't want to come off as training doesn't matter. Right. But for most people, training is a small element of a bunch of other stuff that makes you hot and happy and continuing to pay your gym membership, which is ultimately what you want them doing. But I think most CrossFit gyms would operate much more they would be healthier businesses if they were operating on a small group model, still delivering the same CrossFit. So whether it would be, I think with CrossFit, a big element of it is doing the class and that competitive element and everybody kind of doing the same thing scaled. But I think you could do that running that, what was the correct the small group model that everybody is, not necessarily the semi-private, but I think you could do CrossFit in a small group setting at a higher price point, and have it just be a healthier business in the way it's run in a lot of places now. And if you guys are looking for an example of that, there is a guy who is doing this very successfully near you, Chris, in Portland, Oregon. His name is Dan Purrington, and his gym's Woods Lawn Fitness. So go check that out.
Is it a CrossFit gym?
It is a CrossFit gym, but he runs it almost entirely small group, or a large portion of it.
So 6 to 1 basically sessions.
Yeah, 4 to 6. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
But yeah, I'm sure he nerds out about training, does all that. But it helps. It's cool. It's a good selling point for a mom, but I don't think that's 100% of the sauce. I just think it's easier to get 120 people to pay you $300 a month than it is to get 3 times 360 people to pay you $100 a month.
And your retention is going to be better.
100%.
Yeah.
I have one more question about the staff piece. Because John mentioned some of the issues we ran into. Another issue we ran into was, what happens when you have, on the flip side, too many people who are managerial level and need the next thing. And I'm wondering if that's part of the driving force of you opening locations because I think that was part of why we also did the same thing. It's we've got too many people who've kind of outgrown their spot. I guess we got to open a new gym for them.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps to have other locations when you're trying to grow and develop a team, right? Because there's really only so many roles, I think, within a single gym that you can get to. And I know Mark Fisher and Keeler talk about this all the time. But certainly the way that I'm structuring it as I open gyms is that I definitely will have kind of a central management team, right? That oversees the locations, and the locations will have their own kind of management structure and roles and responsibilities. And so that creates a nice little easy ladder, very clear ladder up the organization. And so it keeps people incentivized from that perspective, that they know that there's room for growth. Because I think you're right. If you didn't have that within a single gym, you'd have to figure out how do you keep these people happy over time. And a lot of times it comes down to compensation, but I still see that not necessarily working great for gym owners over time, over a long period of time.
Well, for us, it was because we had 4 people, everybody. Well, first let's start with what percentage of your revenue goes to staff pay?
About 42% right now.
Okay. So that's what I would consider almost every guru is somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 45 is healthy. So you're on the higher end, but as looks like you're giving a lot of stuff and prioritizing, having lower turnover. So that makes sense. So we were on the higher end of that too. But one of the issues we ran into with 4 people, I think the thing that could make this work is 2 instead of 4, right? Because the delta between our lowest person and our highest paid person was like $14,000. It was like the bottom end was 36 and the top end was like 50. And if you need to make more than 50, you had to go get some personal training clients or figure some shit out, because that was just all the business could afford. But like living in New York or Hoboken on $50,000 is not like, you're not living large, right? This isn't like, you couldn't rent a place for $800. So, and when you average that out to like a paycheck, you're really talking $100, $200 once everything's removed from there. So, I think part of this, Teo, maybe is the fact that it's 2 instead of 4, so you could have, that gives you a little more wiggle room, even though you're staying within the healthy range, right? Because 45, if your smaller gym's like $700,000, right?
Yeah, correct.
So that gives you like that. Yeah. So 415, that gives you $315,000 in potential staff pay. Yeah. Like you can probably have somebody getting close to $100,000 there, right?
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. I just don't know how we would have done it with way we were.
You just would have had to work twice as hard. You just
had to do double the work hard as I possibly could. Like maybe it was that we had too many classes, too many people, too many bodies, too many. Yeah, I don't know. It's
what did your schedule look like? I'm just curious.
We were like 8 or 9 classes a day, I think.
Yeah.
So it was typically we would do. One person would do a morning shift, which was like 3 or 4 classes. It was 4, right? Because we used to have like 5, 6, 7, 9, but then we got rid of the 5, and then that coach had to stick around and do the noon. So they do 6 to noon, and then the evening shift was like 4 to, I don't know, last class was 7:38.
So that's basically 2 coaches every day, though, right? That's it.
Yep. But then we had another 6 hours on the weekend. Right. Because we would have been 20 a pop. We would have been 20 a pop there. And then we'd have another 6 hours on the weekend. And then we had all the personal training.
Because the other issue with CrossFit is it's such a difficult barrier to entry for Gen Pop. We had to do one-on-ones. And so every new member you're selling 6 to 12 one-on-ones. And, for a while there, yes, we were growing, our churn was kind of high. I think part of that's New York, part of it was just we were learning. And so when you're selling so many new people to keep growing, you have so many one-on-ones on the front end you have to fulfill on top of your coach load, on top of the business call, the following up with your leads, sales appointments. Like it got to be pretty.
Yeah. So our New York location did around like 93% month over month churn. And we need to put an asterisk by that. Like Teo said, we were in the Lower East Side. Like it was like basically Chinatown. And it was like the spot you would go when you graduated college to like party for a few years before you like lived the life of an actual human. So like there was a very high like natural turnover built in. But if at 250 members at a 7% monthly churn, we were losing 18 a month, and we were netting so let's say just to break even, let's say 18. What was our on-ramp? 6, 4? It changed, but I think we settled around 6.
It was 12 for a while. Towards the end, we dialed it in and got it to 6, but it was when we were doing Mad Lab, it was 12.
So 6. So you're looking at 100, you're looking at another 25 sessions a week just to break even.
Yeah. Interesting.
So again, a model, another model.
Yeah.
So again, again, the model, right? Like I think I go back to like, I think it's the model, but like, if you could figure out the on-ramp thing and you could get people into class, which maybe you could if it's just coaching 4 people, but this was like insane. Like
you had 20-person classes.
Fried after some of these classes.
And then so bringing a new person into that environment was not good. So you had to do one-on-ones with them.
Yeah.
20 people, it's like 25-year-olds and like
really fratty. Just like
very, very fratty environment. Like it was hard. It was not an easy. Yeah. It was not an easy environment to coach, for sure. So like 20 hours on the floor there is like probably 30 hours at like a smaller gym.
Yeah.
So if we were your clients at BFU, how would you coach us through this?
Yeah. How would we
I
fix
ask a
this
lot of
mess?
open-ended questions. See how you're feeling. No. I think I would definitely dig into the churn a little bit. And I think everything that you're saying makes sense, but 7% obviously is higher than what we'd recommend from the industry standard. My churn is sub 2% across both locations. And so I think that's why the model works, right? And then I would also probably ask you about your one-on-ones and if there's an easier way or a more scalable way to on-ramp newer people into your community that doesn't require you to use as many coach resources.
So we tried that, but okay. So CrossFit used to do it as like it's a weekend course that you have to go through, which was an awful idea because it creates so much sales friction, right? Like someone comes in and is like, I want to try CrossFit on like a Monday. We're like, cool. So, we got these 2 on-ramp classes that are like 3 hours each that you need to attend. And it's like Sunday from like 6 a.m. in the morning to like 9 a.m. And then it's like a Wednesday from like 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. because those are the only slots that.
And you have to do them in order also.
Or you start from scratch.
Yes.
Or you can do them one-on-one with me for 80, for a bunch more money that you don't want to pay.
And remind me, what's the worst case that happens if you throw somebody new into
They die.
CrossFit?
They die.
Okay,
Rhabdo, typically
Fair
rhabdo.
Okay. Yeah. And you only have one coach per class, right?
We were double sometimes.
Sometimes we had to do 2 because it was literally 18, 20 people trying to do snatches in a workout. So, yeah.
I guess I would ask the question of, you guys probably thought about this, but like there's got to be a way that you can accelerate the on-ramp for new people into your community. I think that's the ticket for me here. And so I would think through that.
So I think it is, you just have to do small group instead because the gym I'm going to, and there's a few I've kind of checked out, like who don't do individual design, but are doing the small group. There's not a lot of coaching or preparation for the workouts, but they're programmed where, there's a scale up or scale down for every movement. And because there's only 4 to 6 at any time, it's like if you need to step aside and work with someone for a second, you're able to do that. And so I think it's kind of a combination of like programming a little bit smarter and then also just scaling everything down. So if you need to spend more time, like even Dan Trink's gym, and they're doing like, they don't have an onboarding. Like you go into his 4-person class right after you sign up and you're doing like squats, you're doing bench press, you're doing like barbell movements, but because it's 4 people, it's not a big deal if you have to spend a little extra time.
Yeah. So he basically just manages the foundational aspect of that by having less people so he can work with those individuals who don't have any experience.
Yeah. And because it's all it's on a program. It's like a strength program. So your other clients who've been there for a while, they look at their weights. They kind of know the drill anyway. They know what they're doing on Wednesdays, 5 pounds more than Monday and whatever.
I think what we do is actually pretty similar because we just throw new people in. And even if somebody doesn't have any history of strength training, they might be paired in a group with people who have been with us for 2 or 3 years. So literally when I'm training somebody, I could be like, hey, I want you to warm up your trap bar. I don't want you to get to 285. We're going to go 3x6 today. And they just understand inherently how to do that because they've been training with us, right? So I literally don't have to spend any time with them. I can spend most of my time with other people. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the stuff that's gotten the large group models that have gotten to like hundreds of locations, it's always like a very simple training style. You have like an Orange Theory where it's like 3 stations. So when you're on station 1, you run on a treadmill.
Yeah,
Everyone knows how to do
machines.
that.
Half of the stations are machines that you can't really.
Station 2 is a rower. And when you're on the rower, you just rip on the rower. We're not really going to coach you. Just rip on that thing. Get your heart rate as high as humanly possible. You want to see orange on the board. All right. And then the third thing is usually some type of weight thing, but it's like a press or a row or something that's inherently incredibly simple and with lightweight high rep. Or like F45, you know, it's like stations. It's like, this is a sled. It has weight on it. You just walk it up and down the turf, and like stuff that's like very easy to just throw a body in and rotate them
I don't
around.
even know if F45 uses live coaches anymore. I think there's a coach there to kind of like watch him, but I think
It's
most
like
of their
a
stuff is done on
robot?
video. Yeah. Well, it's like
It's just
there's
some
like
person in the Philippines. Just
I think there's like a central coach on a screen who's actually going through the movement and actually doing the coaching for that movement in the circuit. And then the coach there just kind of is a.
Oh, I thought you said like they didn't have like a live coach.
I mean, that's the ultimate scalable option.
I'm
right?
sure
like,
that's what
it's a
they're
robots.
working
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
like Optimus just out there coaching the class. That's rad. If somebody wants to do that, I want to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what was the Fit Body Boot Camp? There's like no real equipment in there anyway. It's like TRX and like, you know, body weight type stuff. And I know that we've talked to some of those guys and they can get like up to 50 in a class. And so that makes it really easy. Just LBO and just run bodies through the thing. And then for your thing, it's a little more premium, but you can come in and you just rely on your OG people to know while you get the other person up to speed. And, you know, worst case scenario, you maybe have two people in a class who have no clue what they're doing. You can kind of pull them aside and get them going.
Because with CrossFit, you literally have to teach the 3 positions of the clean. Like you have to fucking break that stuff down, and it's
Yeah, I would say teaching a medicine ball slam is a lot easier than teaching a power clean. Yeah, so
If you talk to like a hardcore CrossFit person, they would just say the problem is not CrossFit. The problem is you're a shitty coach.
yeah, which is fine. You know, I can put them on a PVC pipe, but that's not great for someone who's like just trying to start working out. You know, like
Right. And yeah, it's hard to do. So it's not to say it's impossible. It's just hard to do. But all right. So you got two. When you got two per location, you got the person who's like the programming person, and you have the person who's like the ops person, it sounds like. And your other locations too as well, or do you have a third body over there?
yeah, pretty much everyone's staffed for 2. The only one that's my original location we have almost 300 members at this point. So we do run kind of like 3 blocks during the day of training. So we do have like a pretty hardcore kind of like 10 to 2 p.m. block every day of a lot of people that fall in there. But everybody else is at 2. So basically it's like a morning block, and then that morning person does the midday class, and then there's an evening block. And one person doesn't train on Friday, so they can train on Saturdays. That's kind of how it works.
wait. So when it's every 30 minutes, it's not 2 coaches though. Every 30 minutes, it's 1, because there's only really one section that you need the coaching for. The warm up and the cool down is on their own.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically one coach. If we're doing, say, like a 4-4-4 stagger, in those 2 hours, the expectation is they train all 12 people. If we do add a second coach, which we do have a few hours that are high demand where we have a second coach in, we'll run like an 8-4-8. So in those 2 hours, we'll hit 20 people, 20 sessions between the 2 coaches.
And then no admin, no front desk, none of that.
No admin, no front desk.
All right. And then
Who takes the sales
ops
appointments?
person's
Who
like
calls the
the
leads?
salesperson.
I have a central salesperson, sales and member experience person, who calls all the leads. She has somebody part-time who actually reports into her, who kind of helps with the volume. She's also a coach. So she used to train with me, took her off the floor about a year ago to focus on sales and member experience. And so the good thing is that when we do have consultations that come in, she can actually take them through the movement piece of that consultation as well, without having to interact with another coach to do that.
How long did it take you to get to this point? So I'm assuming you were on the floor from the beginning.
I'm still on the floor probably about like 5 hours a week.
Sure, right. But
Just
in the
because I want to.
Yeah, exactly. In the early days, you were that other body.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to get out and you could, get someone else in that role?
About a couple years.
Okay.
And so as you had the third, when are you going to, it seems like at one point someone adds like a regional, like a manager of all of the managers. And when are you thinking about that?
I have a number 2 in the business right now who I call like a chief of staff, which I know is a very tech oriented word, but she's essentially number 2. So she actually manages most of the team. The only people that report into me are her and my sales and member experience leader. And eventually I'm going to get kind of a content marketing person because right now I'm doing all of that work on my own. But those are the only 3 roles that report to me. Everybody else reports into her or layers down.
Speaking of, with all the, because you do have a larger group, you do have the small group, right? Or did I get confused?
Yeah, he has both.
Yeah. You have both. So what is the offer when, on your websites, on your marketing collateral, what are you offering people to get them in the gym?
Yeah, basically our base trial is 2 personal training sessions, so 2 semi-private sessions, plus unlimited classes for 30 days.
And what's the price?
$99.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a sweet deal.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Do you run into issues with it being such a big discount when it's time to convert? Because that's a big jump.
My hypothesis was that we would.
That would be mine as well.
Yeah.
It turns out everyone in Seattle is rich because they work at Amazon.
We converted like 65, 70% from LBO to recurring membership, which is actually a pretty good, healthy percentage. And yeah, I haven't had too much pushback off that. Occasionally we do, but honestly, I'd rather have a really sexy offer and drive more leads into the door than have a higher offer and we're not getting leads in. So
do they know the full price? That's like, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we tell them that, upfront. We're pretty upfront. Like, we're like, hey, we have ranges of our memberships, go from $199 to $669, depends on what you want. We're going to give you basically access to everything that we offer in these 30 days, because the idea is that we want to see what resonates with you and what works. And then from there, we'll kind of make a sales recommendation about midway through, depending on how the trial's going.
And what is the nurture process for people by the LBO? Because unlimited classes, you have a coach who's making sure they come. When they said they were going to come, like what's the cadence for?
Yeah, basically. So in the initial consultation after the assessment, we'll actually have them download Zen Planner. We'll get them on their app. We'll sign them up for their first couple sessions to make sure that they're getting into the gym and they have confirmed times. And then we follow up with them 3 days after that, just to kind of check in, say like, hey, how's it going? Have you come in for your first session? Any issues booking classes? All that kind of stuff. And then we follow up with them again at 14 days, which is kind of midway through the trial. We do the same thing. Hey, and we ask them very specific questions like, hey, how are you getting into classes? Because we are busy. We want to make sure that they're making it in when they want to make it in. How's the training going? Any other feedback for us, right? And by the way, here's the recurring membership option, just so you can take a look at them. We'll follow up again and ask you if you have any questions about that as you get closer to the end. And then we're basically following up with them every week after that, just to make sure that they convert.
How are we going to tie this back into staffing? Chris, what interesting stuff can we talk about on what kind of special staffing nuggets do you think that we can talk about
Well, staff has to follow up with the leads. It's part of their other value generating roles, right? To justify all that.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we do is, I think in my BFE presentation, I talked about mechanisms a lot, which is something that, if you work at Amazon, you get hammered into your head pretty hard. But like, what mechanisms in your business do you have to make sure that the staff is up to speed and they're following up with these leads, right? And so we have a weekly business review where we have the entire team on, and we actually go through the business in detail. So everybody knows at any time what trials have started, what trials are ending. We know when they're coming to the gym. They know when they need to follow up with somebody. We assign percentages to the likelihood that they're going to convert. We talk about people, so it's a
Your
very
lead scoring in the gym.
It's a little bit, yeah. It's a very concerted process for us to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as each individual that comes in, and how likely they are to convert. And if not, if there's anything that we can do in their last week or so to try and get them over the line.
Let's talk about benefits, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because I hate offering.
Because we tried it. We tried that.
Very expensive.
And at some point,
very annoying. Not very helpful. Especially like if you only employ like young single people, and a lot of times that like the plan that you will offer will be like the employer both the employee and the employer version of the like amount paid would be the same as if they were to just go in the open market and buy a similar plan, which was like kind of the rub and something I found very annoying when I was going through this and offering this. So are you just paying 100%? Or do you just hire older, more mature people? Like what's the calculus here?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like medical, dental, vision, I have a broker that I use, and we go through regions. And so they help me kind of craft the plans. I mean, for a small business, you really probably only need a couple options. So we have like a gold and a silver option. It's super clear for them. And I pay up to 75% of the lowest tiered option. So from a deduction standpoint for the employee, it only ends up being somewhere between $60 and $90 every paycheck that they're being deducted, and I pay the remainder of that on an employee basis. I find that I have a mix. I do have a lot of younger employees, so like early 20s up to kind of, I think my oldest is about 36. But I do find, everyone over 25, obviously, because they're off their parents' insurance, they want insurance. And so they got to find it somehow. And it's a lot cheaper to go through us than it is to go on the market and pay it themselves. And then for the ones who are a little bit younger, they're excited about the prospect of having insurance once their parents are off, right? So I think that's, it's been a pretty big selling point for us.
Yeah, because nobody offers it, right? Like, especially the full suite. Like, it's a differentiator plus the salary thing. I'd imagine you draw in decent coaching.
100%. Yeah. And I think the 401k is probably even a little rarer in terms of that. And so I basically had my own personal financial advisor kind of help me set this up. And then I decided that I wanted to be generous with a match. And so, as a small business, offering a 4% match, I think is pretty competitive. And so, and again, for me, it's about, if we want to build careers, like for me, building a career, like you gotta have a job that has benefits. You gotta have a job that has a retirement plan, like those are pretty basic things. And so I wanted to make sure that I had those available for my employees.
And what do you use to carry out the 401k?
What do you mean? Like what company?
Yeah. Like how do you administer all that? Cause it's probably not a spreadsheet.
Yeah. I hire a company to administer it for me. And so they basically run all of the needed documents on an annual and quarterly basis, and basically administer the plan. So I pay them probably about $500, I think, every quarter to do that work for me. And then basically I'm in terms of managing the deductions and all of that stuff, I do it through payroll.
So basically it's $2,000 for the administration services plus the match.
Exactly.
And what percentage of people take advantage of the match?
Almost everybody on my team. Yeah.
Because we offered all these benefits for Kilo, and I was like shocked at the amount of people who like don't take advantage of them, which was kind of like a surprising part. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not a financial advisor, so I don't give them advice, but I say, hey, you can contribute up to 4% and I'll match up to 4%. So it kind of is a no-brainer, to maximize your investment, but obviously it's up to their perspective.
You had to fire anyone?
Yes, I have.
How did that go?
Yeah, it's always a tough process.
What's the process? Because you have all these benefits. I'm wondering if you have to give them unemployment. Like, what's the process for you? Lessons learned.
Yeah, I think the big thing when you're firing someone is always to have, you want to have you don't want it to be a surprise for them, right? You want to have had to have a lot of conversations before that and to have all of those conversations documented about where they're underperforming and where they need to be developed. And so it's a process, and so I think it starts with, if they're underperforming, having that conversation, documenting that conversation. If it doesn't change, moving them on to more of an official performance improvement plan, like a PIP style document that has very clear actions and things that they need to accomplish in a certain amount of time. And then if they're not able to get those things accomplished, it has to be very clear, cut and dry. If they can't, then, there's the recourse is grounds for termination. Right. And that allows you then the opportunity to say, hey, not a fit anymore. We're just going to end the relationship at that point. You could, Washington at will employment. So I could theoretically fire somebody if I wanted to, just kind of out of the blue. I tend to want to do a little CYA, and make sure that somebody couldn't come back on me and say I had no idea or file a wrongful termination lawsuit for any reason. So I think it's always good to have that kind of in your back pocket. I think learnings is just that, like, make sure that your bases are covered. It's not a surprise to the employee. And, you want to generally kind of leave on good terms if you can. And I think by not making it a surprise to them, they kind of know, and I've gone through the process before with people where they're on a performance improvement plan and they decide to opt out because they don't want to go through the firing process, but they know that it's heading that way. And they just decide, hey, I'm actually going to go do something else. Thanks so much for your time, And so I think you just want to get to that point where it's clear and obvious, there's not a huge amount of animosity and you kind of leave on the best terms possible, but also do what's right for your business.
And have there been instances where it's like a in class issue, or is it their other duties kind of an issue?
I did have one coach who was a frequent offender for showing up late to class, and I believe by frequent offender I mean like 3 times in a year, which is for me is a lot. And so I actually had to build a specific policy around this. Basically said, hey, if you do it 3 times in a year, like I can fire you, basically. And so now it's pretty clear and cut and dry as far as what needs to be happening. It's not a surprise.
I once had a coach show up late for class, and then I put them on basically suspended them. And then I had a meeting with them to talk about showing up for class on time, and they were late to that meeting, and that was the end of that coach. So that was a fun one.
I did have a coach anecdotally show up late on her first day, actually this week, because she got her times mixed up. She wasn't coaching; she was just shadowing. She started the internship process, but I did tell her. Normally, I would actually send somebody home for showing up late on their first day, 15 minutes late, because that's not a good sign. But I actually think she's going to be a good coach, and so I kind of let that one slide a little bit. But I think it is good to set very clear expectations from the get-go. Like, you got to show up on time. Don't mess around.
This was like a AM class, so it was just people sitting in the cold.
Yeah, that's the worst. Yeah, same with the coach.
We had a zero tolerance for that.
Yeah, that was totally agree. Yeah,
that was there was a 1-strike policy there.
Yep.
I think Teo still has sleep problems because of it. So I don't know if I don't know if you should copy that in your gym. Do you still hear do you when you have a kid, there's phantom cries, you hear your kid crying when they're not crying? Do you have phantom alarms, Teo?
Thankfully not phantom alarms. No, I think we've worked through it through therapy and all of, Uncle Greg's medicine has also helped. All of his therapy, his therapeutics.
Glad that your shaman and alternative doctor got you over these tough times. Yeah. Shout out to Shaman Greg, Kilo client. Love him a lot.
Yeah. And Gym World guest.
And previous Gym World guest, correct.
And assistant producer, because we filmed 2 episodes in his room. Yeah, he gets director credits, right?
Yeah, so shout out. But it's not about Greg. It's about Chris today. And Chris, where on the internet do people go if they want to follow along on the SSP journey?
We're going to end on the downer of firing people?
Hey, this is business.
This is business.
Shit. There are ups, there are downs. You're going to have happy endings. You're going to have sad endings.
Jesus. Yeah. Now I'm going to have to go to therapy again. God.
There will be bad days.
Yeah, go to seattlesp.com is our website. And then you can find us on Instagram. We have a few different accounts for the locations, but SeattleSP_QA is the original location. And yeah, that's where you find us.
Chris also is, I think, an expert on raising your ARM, your average revenue per member, by adding additional supplemental services. So hopefully we'll have him on again to talk about some of those strategies. Because, I think it'll be valuable for you, gym owner.
But since we're reaching the hour mark, we're going to have to put you on a performance improvement plan until that time, gym owner. And if you want to continue to get that 4% match, that healthcare, that dental, and that vision that you get by being a Gym World fan, we're going to need you to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on the podcast, leave a 5-star review so other gym owners can learn about how not to fire people. That is all for this week. We love you. We appreciate you. And if you enjoyed it, let us know. We love hearing from you. We love hearing from you. Until next week, goodbye.